Hello students, I welcome you all for today's class on the topic dysmenorrhea. Yes, coming to the definition. As you know, the meaning of this is the pain, and menorrhea refers to the menstruation. So the literally the meaning of dysmenorrhea means painful menstruation. So the literal meaning of dysmenorrhea is the painful menstruation. But coming to a practical and more realistic definition of dysmenorrhea is it is defined as a painful menstruation. It is defined as a painful menstruation of sufficient magnitude so as to incapacitate day-to-day activities. That means painful menstruation is there, and it is that painful that the patient is unable to do the day-to-day activities. She is not able to perform the day-to-day activities. So in that case, and if the menstruation is of that magnitude, then only you can call such condition as dysmenorrhea. So dysmenorrhea is defined as a painful menstruation of sufficient magnitude so as to incapacitate day-to-day activities is called as dysmenorrhea. There are two types of dysmenorrhea, primary and secondary. So coming to first primary dysmenorrhea is also called as spasmodic dysmenorrhea, whereas secondary dysmenorrhea is called as congestive dysmenorrhea. So coming to the primary dysmenorrhea. So primary dysmenorrhea then is defined as the primary dysmenorrhea is one where there is no identifiable pelvic pathology. So here in this type of dysmenorrhea, you will not find any pelvic pathology. That means there is no tumor, there is no polyps, so you will not find any identifiable pelvic pathology. So such a condition is called as primary dysmenorrhea, and the incidence is usually when it make the patient not able to perform day-to-day activities, that is incapacitation, is about 15 to 20%. And but we are prescribing nowadays the oral contraceptive pills and NSAIDs commonly, so that's why the incidence is reduced. Coming to the causes of pain, the mechanism of initiation of uterine pain in primary dysmenorrhea is difficult to establish, but the following are too often related. Usually they are confined to, mostly these primary amenorrhea patients, they are adolescents in age, and almost always confined to ovulatory cycles. That means the cycles are ovulatory. In primary dysmenorrhea, most of the cycles are ovulatory cycles, they are not anovulatory, means ovulation is occurring, the cycles are ovulatory, and the pain is usually cured following pregnancy and vaginal delivery. So I have seen that these type of pains which are related to ovulatory cycles, they are usually relieved following the pregnancy and the vaginal delivery. The pain is related to dysrhythmic uterine contractions and uterine hypoxia. So here the pain, usually why the pain occurs is the pain is because of the dysrhythmic uterine contraction. That means whenever the uterine contracts, the rhythm is not proper. So there is a rule like whenever the uterine body contracts, the cervix should dilate, but here in this case the rhythm is not correct, so that is called as dysrhythmic uterine contraction. And uterine hypoxia means at the time of contraction, uterus is not getting the proper oxygen supply. Okay, so whenever the contractions are dysrhythmic and uterine hypoxia occurs, which leads to the pain at the time of cycles. And one more cause is psychosomatic causes. Usually the tension and anxiety, especially in the young age group or adolescents age, and they have the lower the pain threshold, their pain threshold level is also reduced, or the pain tolerance is reduced, so pain threshold is lower. And one more thing is abnormal anatomical and functional aspects of myometrium. Sometimes the myometrium abnormalities in the structural as well as in the anatomical aspect may also cause the pain or the dysmenorrhea, like uterine myometrial hyperactivity. Sometimes this uterine myometrial hyperactivity is observed in cases of primary dysmenorrhea. So the myometrium, especially the muscular layer, as you know, the uterus has three layers: perimetrium, endometrium, and myometrium. Myometrium is a muscular layer. So the muscular layer is called as a myometrium. Sometimes it undergoes hyperactivity, and because of that there will be pain. So the myometrium can be divided structurally and functionally into two aspects. One is the two parts, so you can say one is the outer myometrium and another is the subendometrial myometrium. Outer myometrium is the outermost myometrium which is related with the perimetrium, whereas subendometrial myometrium is the endometrium which is in close contact with the endometrium. Okay, so these are two different structurally and functionally. The subendometrial layer of the myometrium is also called as the junctional zone, JZ. The subendometrial layer of the myometrium, which is just beneath the endometrium or which is in connection with the endometrium, is also called as a JZ or the junctional zone. So there is marked peristalsis, hyperperistalsis of the JZ, that is a junctional zone, in a woman with endometriosis and adenomyosis. Sometimes what happen, the JZ zone, there will be marked hyperperistalsis, that means the movement will be more excess, you can say. And in women with dysmenorrhea, significant changes in the JZ zones are observed, like there will be irregular thickening and hyperplasia of the smooth muscles and less vascularity. So in the JZ zone of dysmenoric women, there will be irregular thickening and the hyperplasia of the smooth muscles with less vascularity or the less blood supply. This is known as junctional zone hyperplasia. So in dysmenorrhea women, sometimes the junctional zone hyperplasia is observed. Dysperistalsis and hyperactivity of the uterine JZ, that is a junctional zone, are the important mechanism of primary dysmenorrhea. So junctional zone hyperplasia is also observed, and in sometimes dysperistalsis and hyperactivity of the uterine junctional zone is also observed. That is the dysperistalsis means again movement which are not in the proper rhythm, you can say, and hyperactivity is excessive contractions of this zone can leads to dysmenorrhea. Another cause of the pain in primary dysmenorrhea is nothing but imbalance in the autonomic nervous control of the uterine muscles. So what happens, imbalance means what happens here, there will be overactivity of the sympathetic nerves leading to hypertonicity of the circular fibers of the isthmus and the internal os. Isthmus, as you know, the isthmus is a part, or it is a constricted part in between the uterine body and the cervix. So what happens, overactivity of the sympathetic nerves leading to the hypertonicity of the circular fibers of the isthmus and the internal os. That's why the relief of pain following the dilatation of the cervix or following the vaginal delivery may be explained by the damage of the nerves which fail to regenerate. So here the nerves, especially here in that the stomach and the internal os level nerves are becomes overactive, and hypertonicity of the fibers occurs, leading to the pain in the time of menstruation. That's why after vaginal delivery or after doing the dilatation of the cervix procedure, pain is relieved in most of the women, because those nerves get damaged and they are failed to regenerate. So because of that damage to the nerves, patient will not get the pain again. So that is one of the reason why the pain is relieved following vaginal delivery and dilatation of cervix. Then another important point is role of prostaglandins. As you know, prostaglandins are very important, and in ovulatory cycles, under the action of progesterone, prostaglandins are synthesized from the secretory endometrium. So in the ovulatory cycles only prostaglandins are synthesized with the action of progesterone. So they are main two types is PGF2 alpha and PGE2. So prostaglandins are released with maximum production during the shedding of the endometrium. PGF2 alpha, as you know, it is a strong vasoconstrictor. It is a strong vasoconstrictor which constricts the blood vessels. Okay, blood vessels. So what happens when PGF2 alpha increases, which is considered as a strong vasoconstrictor, it causes ischemia or angina of the myometrium. Ischemia is the tissue death because of the lack of oxygen, and there will be pain. And angina is a pain produced in a tissue, especially in a muscle where there is loss of blood supply. So because of that, a specific pain is felt in the muscles. So here also the same thing happens. It is a vasoconstrictor which constricts the blood vessels, leading to the loss of blood supply, and because of the loss of blood supply to the muscle layer, there will be ischemia or angina of the myometrium. So either due to increased production of the prostaglandins or increase in sensitivity of the myometrium to the normal production of prostaglandins, there is increased myometrial contractions with or without dysrhythmia. So what happens here, the increased prostaglandins level causes the increased myometrial contraction. So PGF2 alpha is a vasoconstrictor, along with that it causes the myometrial contractions also. So the two things will operate together. One is the ischemia of the myometrium leading to the pain or angina. Another thing is it increases the myometrial contractions leading to the pain. So whenever the myometrial contraction occurs, there will be pain, or sometimes dysrhythmia may be there or may not be there. Next is one more important factor in causing pain is vasopressin. There is increased vasopressin release during the menstruation in women with primary dysmenorrhea. This explains the persistence of pain in cases even treated with antiprostaglandin drugs. So here there will be increase in the vasopressin level in the women suffering from dysmenorrhea. The mechanism of action is yet to be explored. Vasopressin increases the prostaglandin synthesis, and it also increases the myometrial activity directly. So prostaglandin has two actions. One is it increases the prostaglandin synthesis, another is it directly increases the myometrial activity. So there are in two ways it can act. It causes uterine hyperactivity and dysrhythmic uterine contractions, leading to ischemia and hypoxia, with which it causes the pain. So here it causes the uterine hyperactivity, dysrhythmic contraction, leading to ischemia and hypoxia, which may causes the pain. These are about the vasopressin. Another thing is endothelins. Endothelins can also cause myometrial smooth muscle contraction, especially in the junctional zone. Endothelins in the endometrium can induce again the prostaglandin PGF2 alpha. Local myometrial ischemia caused by endothelins and PGF2 alpha aggravate uterine dysperistalsis and hyperactivity. See, endothelins again it causes the myometrial contraction, especially of the junctional zone, and they also produces the prostaglandin, especially the PGF2 alpha, and both together can aggravate the uterine dysperistalsis and the hyperactivity of the muscles. Another factor responsible in causing the pain is PAF. PAF is platelet activating factor. It is also associated with the etiology of dysmenorrhea, as its concentration is found very high in a woman suffering from the dysmenorrhea. Leukotrienes and PAFS, that is the platelet activating factors, are vasoconstrictors, and they stimulate the myometrial contraction. These are the vasoconstrictors, just like the prostaglandins. They also stimulate the uterine contraction. So these are about the probable etiology of primary dysmenorrhea. First is the progesterone, because progesterone is produced here. Because these cycles are mostly the ovulatory cycle. So corpus luteum is formed after the Graafian follicle ovulation, and this corpus luteum is secreting the progesterone hormone, and this progesterone is producing the prostaglandins, and especially the PGF2 alpha is the prostaglandin, which is causing the excessive uterine contraction. So synthesis and release of PGF2 alpha, and here again the endothelins, leukotrienes and PAFS factors increases the myometrial contractions with or without causing dysrhythmia of the contractions. And then here again the prostaglandins and these other factors reduces the blood flow, leading to the myometrial angina or ischemia. Ischemia leads to angina, and again it causes the pain. So this is all about the probable etiology of the primary dysmenorrhea. Next is coming to the patient's profile. Primary dysmenorrhea is predominantly confined to the adolescent girls. So usually it is confined to the adolescent girls. Usually it appears within 2 years of menarche. So like around the age of 15-16 it can appear. The mother or her sister may be dysrhythmic, and usually you'll find the positive family history, especially the mother, sisters and maternal aunts may be suffering from the dysmenorrhea, and it is more common among the girls from the affluent society. So how you will differentiate these two types, primary and secondary? There are certain clinical differentiating factors between the primary and secondary dysmenorrhea. See, first is in primary dysmenorrhea, no identifiable pelvic pathology. You will not find any pelvic pathology in the primary dysmenorrhea, whereas in secondary dysmenorrhea it is secondary to the pelvic pathology, means because of any pelvic pathology the pain will be there. So this and such type of pain or dysmenorrhea is called as secondary dysmenorrhea. Okay, so here you will find any pelvic pathology will be there, and this secondary dysmenorrhea is secondary to the pelvic pathology. And the thing is, mostly it is seen in the age group, mostly it is seen in the adolescent girls, that is especially after attaining 2 or 3 years of menarche. Whereas in secondary dysmenorrhea is usually seen in elderly or the paras women. Elderly or the paras women means so the woman who has children in the 30s or above age. It is the primary dysmenorrhea is confined to the ovulatory cycles. Here the mostly the cycles are ovulatory, whereas the secondary dysmenorrhea, the pain starts 7 to 10 days before the onset of menstruation. See here the pain starts before the onset of menstruation itself in the secondary dysmenorrhea. Here in the primary dysmenorrhea, it starts with the onset or just before the menses. So pain starts with the onset of menses, so just a few hours before the menses, whereas pain that starts 7 to 10 days before the onset of menstruation. And there is in the secondary dysmenorrhea you will not find any systemic discomfort, whereas in primary you may find the systemic discomfort like nausea, vomiting, giddiness, etc. Intermenstrual period not completely free of pain, that means in the intermenstrual period also the woman complains of pain in cases of secondary dysmenorrhea. So in this way you can say the secondary dysmenorrhea is more painful compared to the primary dysmenorrhea. So coming to the clinical features of primary dysmenorrhea, how the pain will be and what are the symptoms of the primary dysmenorrhea. The pain, how the pain will be in the primary dysmenorrhea. The pain begins a few hours before or just with the onset of menstruation. See, the pain starts before or just with the onset of menstruation, few hours before. And the severity of pain usually lasts for a few hours and may extend to 24 hours. So the how the pain lasts is, it may last for a few hours or sometimes up to 24 hours, but it's very rare beyond 48 hours, means the pain will last for only few hours, usually up to 24 hours, or sometimes may last up to 48 hours also. So 1 or 2 days only the pain will be there. The pain is spasmodic. Patient complains of spasmodic type of pain, and the pain is confined to the lower abdomen, and sometimes it may radiate to the back, medial aspect of thighs, etc. So how the pain, where the pain will be, usually to the lower abdomen she'll complain of pain, and this pain is radiating to the back and the medial aspects of the thighs. Systemic discomforts are also seen like nausea, vomiting, fatigue, diarrhea, headache, tachycardia may be associated. It may be accompanied by the vasomotor changes like causing pallor, cold, sweats, and occasionally fainting. Sometimes in severe dysmenorrhea, patient may get fainted also. Rarely syncope and collapse in severe cases may be associated. And coming to the examination part, the signs, abdominal or pelvic examination does not reveal any abnormal findings. So if you go for the abdominal or pelvic examination, you will not find any abnormal findings. So all the things will be normal. There is no bulge, there is no bulky uterus, there is no mass felt in the abdomen, etc. For detection of any pelvic abnormalities, you can go to the ultrasound directly. Instead of going to the pelvic examination, you can send patient for ultrasonography. Okay, coming to the treatment, general measures include the improvement of the general health and simple psychotherapy in terms of explanation and assurance. Usual activities like sports are to be continued. During menses, the bowel should be kept empty. Usually see in cases of dysmenorrhea there will be constipation, etc. cases, so the bowel should be kept empty. And mild analgesics and antispasmodic may be prescribed. Habit forming drugs such as pethidine and morphine must not be prescribed. With these simple measures, the pain is usually relieved in the majority of cases. But in severe cases, you have to take the help of drugs and the surgery. In severe cases which are not responding to these simple measures like simple analgesic, simple antispasmodic, general measures and all, if it is not responding, then you have to take the help of these drugs and the surgery. So coming to the drugs, which drugs we can advise for the women suffering from dysmenorrhea. So the drugs used are PSIs and OC pills. PSIs is prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors and oral contraceptive pills, usually the combined estrogen and progesterone. So coming to first the prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors, PSI. These drugs reduce the prostaglandin synthesis by inhibition of the cyclooxygenase enzyme and also has a direct analgesic effect. Intrauterine pressure is reduced, and any of the preparation given here can be used orally for 2 to 3 days starting with the onset of period and should be continued for 3 to 6 cycles. So you can start giving these PSI drugs for orally for 2 to 3 days starting with the onset of cycles and it can be continued for 3 to 6 cycles. And the newer drugs in this category includes NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And the patients suitable for medical therapy are usually the young age having contraindications to pills. The contraindications of medical therapy include the allergy to the aspirin, gastric ulceration, and history of asthma. In these patients you should not prescribe NSAIDs, otherwise you can give those drugs. Coming to another method, that is the oral contraceptive pills. The suitable candidates are patients wanting contraceptive precautions also, and the girls who are having heavy periods and unresponsive to or contraindication to the antiprostaglandin drugs we can start with the oral contraceptive pills. The pills should be used for 3 to 6 cycles minimum. Another one is dihydrogesterone or progesterone. Dihydrogesterone is a one type of progestogen, so it does not inhibit the ovulation, but probably it interferes with the ovarian steroidogenesis. It should be given from the day 5 of the cycle for 20 days. It should be continued for 3 to 6 days. From the day 5th of the cycle it can be given for 20 days and it should be continued for 3 to 6 cycles. And one more thing is IUS, that is the LNG IUS, levonorgestrone intrauterine system. It is very effective, 50% in reducing the pain. It is used in women who desires contraception and where the estrogen is contraindicated. So this gives an additional benefit of contraception. The oral contraceptive pills and the LNG IUS system gives an additional benefit of contraception. If the above protocols fails, then laparoscopy is indicated to find out any pelvic pathology to account for pain, and the important one being the endometriosis. If anything, if your giving patient is not responding with even with the oral contraceptive pills, PSIs, LNG, IUS system, etc., then you have to go for ruling out the cause, especially the endometriosis, which can be diagnosed only with the laparoscopy. Okay, if all the treatment fails, then you can go for laparoscopy to find out the endometriosis, which may be a cause of pelvic pain. Then coming to the surgeries includes TENS, that is the transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation, and other procedures like LUNA, laparoscopic uterine nerve ablation, and laparoscopic pre-sacral neurectomy and dilatation of cervical canal can also be done. First is the transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation. Here we take help of the electricity to reduce the pain. See, transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation. It is a method of pain relieving involving the use of mild electrical current. See, this is a TNS machine, which is a small battery operated device that has leads connected to the sticky pads called electrodes. So these are the electrodes. You can attach the pads directly to the skin of a patient and the machine is switched on, and small electrical impulses are delivered to the affected area of the body. So this is one type of pain relieving mechanism called as transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation. This can also be done. So this can be used. Transcutaneous electric nerve stimulation has been used to relieve dysmenorrhea. Results are not better than those of analgesics. Means for a short period the pain is reduced and again the pain aggravates. And surgical procedures includes LUNA, and LUNA is the laparoscopic uterine nerve ablation. Here for primary dysmenorrhea, here with the help of laparoscope you are cutting the nerve fibers which are reaching the uterus so that the pain is reduced. Another is laparoscopic pre-sacral neurectomy. It is done to cut down the sensory pathways via the T11 and T12 from the uterus. It is not helpful for the adnexal pain. So pre-sacral nerve pathways are cut down in this condition. And its role in true dysmenorrhea is questionable, but patient again complains of some adnexal pain because it controls the pain from the uterus, but the adnexal pain is felt, so it is also not that much useful. And one more method is the dilatation of the cervical canal. It is done under anesthesia for slow dilatation of the cervix to relieve pain by damaging the sensory nerve endings. So in this way, if you dilate the cervix, what happens? The sensory nerve endings are damaged. So because of that, the patient complains of less pain. But here the complication is cervical incompetence. If you do excessive dilatation, it may lead to cervical incompetence, which may complicate the pregnancies in future. So these are the drugs. Common treatment modalities for primary dysmenorrhea: medical management, mefenamic acid 250 to 500 mg 8 hourly, ibuprofen 400 mg 8 hourly, naproxen 250 mg 6 hourly, and surgical management: laparoscopic uterine nerve ablation, LUNA, and laparoscopic presacral neurectomy LPSN, and hormonal combined OC pills 1 tablet daily, oral progesterone, dydrogesterone D5 to D25, LNG IO system, etc. This is a management protocol of primary dysmenorrhea. Assurance: analgesics and antispasmodic drugs to keep the bowel empty, encourage the normal activities of a patient. If it fails, then you have to start with the medical treatment. No contraindication for prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors. Then presence of contraindications of pill. Patient desiring pregnancy, then you have to go for PSIs, that is prostaglandin synthetase inhibitors, for 3 to 6 cycles, or else you can also use LNG IUS system. Another one, if there is no contraindications to pills, patient wanting contraception, presence of contraindication to PSIs, then you can go for the oral contraceptive pills and for 3 to 6 cycles, or LNG IUS system. If no contraindications of either, and if all these treatment fails, PSIs as well as oral contraceptive pills, then you have to go for USG or laparoscopy to exclude the pelvic pathology, especially the endometriosis. Then laparoscopy afterwards, you have to go for the last resort is a surgical method, which is nothing but uterine nerve ablation, LUNA, presacral neurectomy, LPSN, which is very rarely done, and dilatation of the cervix, which is also rarely done. So this completes the primary dysmenorrhea. So coming to the secondary dysmenorrhea. Secondary dysmenorrhea is also called as a congestive type of dysmenorrhea. It is normally considered to be a menstruation associated pain occurring in the presence of pelvic pathology. So it is also considered as a menstruation associated pain occurring in the presence of a pelvic pathology. So you will find the pelvic pathology here. Causes of pain: the pain may be related to increasing tension in the pelvic tissue due to premenstrual pelvic congestion or increased vascularity in the pelvic organs. So there may be premenstrual pelvic congestion or increased amount of blood flow in the pelvic organs. Coming to the patient's profile, the patients are usually in their 30s. More often they are paras, that means already having the children, and unrelated to any social status. So it is not related to any poor or rich people, not related to any social status. Coming to the clinical features, how the pain will be: the pain is usually dull, situated in the back and in front without any radiation. It usually appears 3 to 5 days prior to the period and relieves with the onset of bleeding. See, the pain starts before the appearance of menstruation, and pain is relieved with the onset of bleeding. Similarly, in our Ayurveda, Udavartini Yoni Vyapadis mentioned. There they mentioned that Raja Mukte tu Tatshanam Labhati Sukham, means as the Raja is expelled out, the patient complains, gets the relief. Tat Raja Mukte tu Tatshanam Labhate Sukham. So the pain will be there, but as soon after the expulsion of the Raja or the menstrual blood, the woman gets relief from the pain. So it can be better compared with the Udavartini Univyapam. And there is no systemic discomfort here, like in cases of primary dysmenorrhea. The patient may have got some discomfort even in between the periods. Even in between the periods, there will be some pain to the patient. An abdominal and vaginal examination reveals the pelvic pathology. Here you will find any bulge or any mass, anything. Pelvic pathology is expected here. Coming to the investigation, transvaginal sonography can detect most pelvic pathology like leiomyoma, adenomyosis, etc. Saline infusion sonography can give an idea of submucous fibroid polyps. Laparoscopy, yes, it is used to diagnose endometriosis or PID, useful for both diagnostic and therapeutic purposes. Hysteroscopy is useful for both diagnostic and therapeutic purposes. Coming to the treatment aims at the cause rather than the symptoms. The type of treatment depends on the severity, age, and the parity of the patient. So here the treatment aims at the cause rather than the symptoms. So you have to rule out the cause and you have to treat it accordingly. So this is all about the secondary dysmenorrhea. One more dysmenorrhea is there called as ovarian dysmenorrhea. Here in the ovarian dysmenorrhea there is one syndrome called as right ovarian vein syndrome. Right ovarian vein syndromes. Why right ovarian vein only? Because the right ovarian vein crosses the ureter at right angles. So during premenstrual period, due to the pelvic congestion or increased blood flow, there may be marked engorgement in the vein, which leads to pressure on the ureter, stasis, infection, pyelonephritis, and the pain. So it is called as the right ovarian vein syndrome, causing the pyelonephritis and the pain. So coming to the causes of unilateral dysmenorrhea. Unilateral means only one side patient complains of pain. This includes ovarian dysmenorrhea, especially the right ovarian vein syndrome, bicornuate uterus, unilateral location of pelvic endometriosis, small pelvic fibroid near one corner of the uterus, right ovarian vein syndrome, and colonic or cecal spasm, etc. Next, a small topic is other disorders which cause menstrual pain or other disorders related with the menstrual pain. So first one among these other disorders which causes the menstrual pain is one syndrome called as Mittels-Kamer syndrome, or also called as the ovular pain. Mittels-Kamer syndrome or the ovular pain is not an infrequent complaint. It appears in the mid-menstrual period. Especially the pain is in the mid-menstrual period. The pain is usually situated in the hypogastrium or in either of the iliac fossa. The pain is usually located on one side. This see here the pain is located on the one side. Depending upon the side of the ovary is ovulating, so which ovary is ovulating, that side only the pain will be there, and it does not change from side to side. So this is the specificity of this pain is it is a ovular pain occurring from only the ovulatory ovary. So the pain is felt only on the one side or usually around the ovary which is ovulating. And nausea and vomiting is usually absent, and it rarely lasts for more than 12 hours. It may be associated with slight vaginal bleeding or excessive mucoid vaginal discharge at the time of pain. So usually it is last less than 12 hours. Hardly it can last for 12 hours. So the exact cause is not known. The probable factors are it is associated with ovulation. Okay, so increased tension of the Graafian follicle just prior to rupture, or peritoneal irritation by the follicular fluid following the ovulation. So whatever there is some release of the follicular fluid after the rupture of the Graafian follicle, and that fluid may cause some peritoneal irritation causing the pain, or because of contraction of the tubes and uterus at the time of ovulation to release the ovum from the Graafian follicle. So because of that also it can cause a pain. So here it is called as the ovular pain. The treatment, it is effective with assurance analgesics, and in some cases you can go for the contraceptive pills to make the cycle anovular. Another syndrome is pelvic congestion syndrome. As the name itself suggests, here there will be congestion in the pelvic organs. There is disturbances in the autonomic nervous system which may lead to gross vascular congestion with pelvic varicosities. Varicosities will also be there here. The patient has a congestive type of dysmenorrhea without any demonstrable pelvic pathology. Here there is varicosities and vascular congestion is the main pathology here. Diagnosis, it is made by physical examination, radiographic study like pelvic venography, Doppler scan, duplex ultrasound scan, CT, MRI, angiography. Laparoscopic diagnosis is difficult as with intraperitoneal pressure, and here in the Trendelenburg's position the vessels may be compressed and it may reappear with the pressure is reduced. Patient complains of vague disorders with back pain, pelvic pain with long standing positions at the time of dysmenorrhea. So here the vague complaints like back pain, pelvic pain, especially in the long standing positions. Patient complains because of increase in the congestion. Sometimes dyspareunia will also be there, and it is associated with menorrhagia or epimenorrhea. The uterus may feel bulky or boggy sometimes. Treatment is unsatisfactory. You can go for the progesterone therapy, MPA, that is the medroxyprogesterone acetate, 50 mg daily for 4 months is found effective. In paras women with advancing age, you can go for hysterectomy if the pain is not relieved. So it is compared with this is called as pelvic congestion syndrome. So another is the menstrual hygiene, menstrual migraine. As you know, migraine is a headache, one type of headache or the pain. So it is characterized by the attack of migraine that occurs either premenstrually or both premenstrually and also at other times. Sometimes before the menstruation, the patient complains of migraine. Sometimes other time also patient complains of the migraine. So it is called as the menstrual migraine. Treatment is the drugs of migraine can also be given, or NSAIDs can be given. Sometimes there will be seizures, etc. In that case, you can go for anticonvulsions therapy. And next last point in this case is premenstrual syndromes, also called as PMS or premenstrual tension. Premenstrual syndrome, PMS, is a psychoneuroendocrine disorders of unknown etiology. See here, it is the etiology is not known. It is often noticed just prior to menstruation. So premenstrual, as the name itself suggests, it is seen prior to the menstruation, and there is cyclic appearance of a large number of symptoms during the last 7 to 10 days of the menstrual cycle. So here, just before attaining the next menstruation, 7 to 10 days of the menstruation, you will find the symptoms. It should fulfill the following criteria. So what is the criteria of a PMS is, it is not related to any organic lesion. So you will not find any organic lesions like tumor, adenomyosis, fibroid, etc. Regularly occurs during the luteal phase of each ovulatory menstrual cycle. See, it regularly occurring at the luteal phase, that is in the second half of the ovulatory menstrual cycle. That means here the cycles are ovulatory. That is the important point. Here the cycles are ovulatory. Ovulation is occurring. Symptoms must be severe enough to disturb the lifestyle of a woman, or she requires medical help. Sometimes the severe becomes very symptoms are very severe to disturb her daily life. Symptom free period during the rest of the cycle. With these syndromes disturb daily functioning, and when it becomes too severe, then in that case it is called as PMDD, that is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Premenstrual syndrome, PMS, is the same thing they have mentioned here. Coming to its pathophysiology, exact cause is not known, but the following hypothesis may be postulated, like alteration in the level of estrogen and progesterone. Alteration, that is progesterone and estrogen ratio, varies starting from the mid luteal phase. Either there is altered estrogen and progesterone ratio or diminished progesterone ratio. Neuroendocrine factors, serotonin level. Serotonin is an important neurotransmitter in the CNS. During the luteal phase, decreased synthesis of serotonin is observed in women suffering from PMS. Endorphins, the symptom complex of PMS is thought to be due to withdrawal of the endorphins. Here endorphins are also reduced, serotonins are also reduced, and GABA, that is the alpha aminobutyric acid, GABA, suppresses the anxiety level in the brain. Medication that are GABA agonists are effective. Psychological and psychosocial factors may be involved to produce the behavioral changes. So coming to its symptomatology, symptoms includes some water retention symptoms will be there, like abdominal bloating, breast tenderness, swelling of the extremities, weight gain, and neuropsychiatric symptoms will be there, like irritability, depression, mood swings, forgetfulness, restlessness, increased appetite, tearfulness, anxiety, tension, confusion, headache, anger, etc. And behavioral factors like fear, dyspareunia, tiredness, insomnia also will be there. So these are the symptomatology of PMS and PMDD. Others factors which are involved is TRH, that is the thyrotropin releasing hormone, prolactin, renin, aldosterone, prostaglandin, etc. But nothing is conclusive. You cannot say it's because of this reason only. Coming to the clinical features, PMS is more common in women aged 30 to 45 years. It may be related to childbirth or some disturbing life event, and there is no abnormal pelvic findings here except the features of pelvic congestion. You will find the pelvis is congested, but you will not find any other pelvic pathology here. Treatment, as the etiology is multifactorial, so treatment is often obscure, so various drugs are given here along with the lifestyle modification. Cognitive behavioral therapy is also important. Coming to the treatment, general non-pharmacological measures includes assurance, yoga, stress management, diet manipulations, avoidance of salt, because here fluid retention will be there. So salt, caffeine and alcohol is to be avoided, especially in the second half of the cycle to relieve the symptoms. So you can advise patient to avoid salt, caffeine, coffees and alcohol, etc. Coming to the non-hormonal treatment, tranquilizers or antidepressant drugs may be of help logically, and pyridoxine 100 mg twice daily is helpful by correcting the tryptophan metabolism, especially following the pill associated depression. So it helps in reducing the depression level. Pyridoxine 100 mg twice daily is to be advised. And diuretics in the second half of the cycle can be given to reduce the bloating and fluid retention. Furosemide or Lasix will be there, 20 mg daily for consecutive 5 days in a week reduces the fluid retention. Anxiolytic agents are found to be helpful to women having persistent anxiety. If she is having the anxiety, then anxiolytic drugs can be advised, like alprazolam. Angiot will be there, 0.25 mg BID is given during the luteal phase of the cycle. And one more thing is SSRI, that is the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SNRI, that is non-adrenaline reuptake inhibitors, are also found very effective. Like fluoxetine is an antidepressant that inhibits the neuronal uptake of serotonin. A single dose of 20 mg was found to improve the psychiatric and behavioral symptoms. The drugs are usually prescribed at least 2 days prior to the onset of symptoms and to be continued till the menstruation occurs. Other drugs used are sertraline 50 mg per day and venlafaxine. Hormones, you can also prescribe hormones. Any one of the following drugs is to be prescribed, like oral contraceptive pills, OC pills. The idea is to suppress the ovulation, because the pain is associated with ovulation. Here the cycles are ovulatory, and to maintain a uniform hormonal level, myelin or the level. The therapy is to be continued for 3 to 6 cycles. Newer OC pills can be tried here, like containing the progesterone and drosperinone, and it has anti-mineralocorticosteroid and anti-androgenic properties can also be prescribed. Drosperinone containing OC pills are found to have better control of the symptoms. Progesterone can also be prescribed. It is not effective in treating PMS, but LNG IUS system has been used to suppress the ovarian cycle. Then spironolactone is a potassium sparing diuretic. It has a anti-mineralocorticoid and anti-androgenic effects. It is given in the luteal phase, 25 to 200 mg per day. It improves the symptoms of PMDD. And bromocriptine 2.5 mg daily or twice daily may be helpful, at least to relieve the breast complaints. And suppression of ovarian cycle, why we have to suppress the cycle is because these are ovulatory cycles again, so with the hormones only the symptoms will be there. So to suppress the cycle, we can give the dinazole 200 mg daily, is to be adjusted to induce the amenorrhea or barrier method of contraception has to be advised at the time of using danazole. Then GnRH agonist can be advised, like goserelin, leuprolene acetate, etc. In last, we can go for a surgical method, which is the oophorectomy. Okay, yes, this completes the dysmenorrhea and other symptoms of other disorders causing the pain. Go through this class video and make proper notes. Thank you.